The rain poured heavily that night, drenching the city in endless streams of water. Under the dim glow of a street lamp, a young man stood, his heart pounding in his chest. His hands trembled as he gripped a small, worn-out umbrella, his eyes fixed on the small cafe across the street. Inside she sat, beautiful, radiant, and completely unaware of the storm raging both outside and inside his heart. Kwame took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the bouquet of flowers he had bought with his last few coins. Tonight was the night. He had rehearsed the words over and over, imagining how she would smile, how she would take his hands and whisper the words he longed to hear. He had loved her for years, ever since they met in university. From the very first day, there was something about Adesua that made his world stop. The way she walked, the way she laughed, the way she spoke with confidence. It was like she was made of fire, and he was drawn to her warmth. But Kwame was not the man she wanted. He was smart, hardworking, and full of dreams. But dreams did not put food on the table. Dreams did not buy expensive dresses, luxury cars, or vacations in Dubai. Adesua wanted a man who had already made it, not a man who was still struggling to find his way. Tonight, he was going to take a chance. He had nothing to offer but his heart, and he hoped, prayed, that it would be enough. Kwame pushed open the cafe door, his clothes dripping wet from the rain. Adesua looked up, her deep brown eyes meeting his. She was even more beautiful up close, her caramel skin glowing under the soft lights. She wore a red dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her long braids cascading over her shoulders. "Kwame," she said with a small smile, "what are you doing here?" He swallowed the lump in his throat and pulled out the chair across from her. "I needed to see you. There's something I need to say." She raised a brow, taking a sip of her coffee. "Go on. I'm listening." His heart pounded. "Adesua, I've loved you for as long as I can remember. I know I don't have much right now, but I swear I will do anything to make you happy. Give me a chance, and I will spend my life proving to you that I'm the man you deserve." For a moment, there was silence. Then Adesua let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. "Kwame, you're sweet, but love isn't enough. Look at you. You're still struggling, still trying to figure out your life. I need a man who already has everything, not one who is still building." His chest tightened. "But I have a vision. I'm working hard. One day, One day?" she interrupted. "What if that day never comes? What if you never make it? Kwame, I can't spend my life waiting for you to become successful. I need stability now, not promises for the future." Kwame felt the world shift beneath his feet. He had expected rejection, but not like this. Not so cold, so final. His throat burned as he forced himself to smile. "I understand," he said, standing up. "Thank you for your honesty." He turned to leave, but before he stepped out into the rain, he looked back one last time. "Remember this night, Adesua," he said, his voice low but firm. "One day you will wish you had said yes." And with that, he walked into the storm, letting the rain wash away his pain. But what Adesua didn't know was that life has a way of turning tables, and soon she would regret the night she turned him down. Adesua never thought much about that night. In her mind, Kwame was just another man who couldn't meet her standards. She moved on with her life, focusing on her career, her dreams, and most importantly, her desire to find a wealthy, successful man who could give her the life she deserved. And for a while, things seemed to be going well. She met Tunde, a young businessman who drove the latest cars and dressed in designer suits. He took her to expensive restaurants, showered her with gifts, and made her feel like a queen. This was the life she had always imagined. Fancy dates, weekend getaways, and the comfort of knowing she would never have to struggle. But life, as always, had other plans. 6 months into their relationship, Adesua noticed the cracks. Tunde's business was not as stable as he had claimed. The expensive lifestyle, it was all a performance. He had debts, loans, and a long list of unpaid bills that he was desperately trying to hide. One evening, she went to his house and found the truth waiting for her. The furniture was gone. The luxury car, repossessed. The house, empty. Tunde had vanished, leaving behind nothing but broken promises. Adesua was shattered. She had given him her time, her love, and even her money. And now she was left with nothing but regret. For the first time in her life, she felt lost. She started seeing the world differently. She watched as some of her friends got married, not to rich men, but to men who truly loved them. Men who built their lives together with their wives, supporting and growing with each other. And then, one day, something happened that changed everything. She was scrolling through social media when she saw a name she hadn't thought about in years, Kwame Olumide. Her heart skipped a beat. The headline read, "From broke to billionaire, the man who built an empire from nothing." Her hands trembled as she clicked on the article. The picture showed a man in a sharp, tailored suit, standing in front of a private jet. His eyes were hidden behind designer sunglasses, and his presence radiated power. It couldn't be. She read the article in disbelief. Kwame, the same Kwame she had rejected, was now one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. He owned real estate, tech companies, and luxury hotels. He had made it, beyond anything she could have ever imagined. Adesua felt her stomach twist. She read more. Kwame was hosting a gala event that weekend, one of the biggest in the country. Celebrities, politicians, and billionaires would be in attendance, and in that moment, Adesua made a decision. She had to see him again. She had to make things right. The night of the gala, she stood in front of the mirror, dressed in the most elegant gown she could find. Her heart pounded as she imagined what it would be like to see Kwame again. Would he recognize her? Would he still remember that rainy night? She arrived at the grand ballroom, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The room was dazzling. Chandeliers, red carpets, and people dripping in wealth and power. Then she saw him. Kwame stood at the center of the room, surrounded by powerful men and beautiful women. He was laughing, confident, and effortlessly charming. And for the first time, Adesua realized something painful. She wasn't part of his world anymore. She had rejected him when he was nothing. And now, he was everything. She took a deep breath and started walking towards him. But just as she was about to reach him, a stunning woman appeared at his side. She leaned in, whispering something in his ear. He smiled at her, his hand resting lightly on her waist. Adesua felt a sharp pang of jealousy. She had lost him, but was it truly over? As Kwame's eyes met hers, for a brief second she saw something, a flicker of recognition. But then he turned away, as if she never existed. Adesua stood frozen, her heart pounding as Kwame turned away, as if she was nothing more than a stranger in the crowd. For a long time she had dreamed of this moment, the day she would see him again, the day he would look at her with longing, regret, maybe even love. But the reality was far more painful. He had moved on. He had become everything she ever wanted, and yet she was no longer part of his world. But Adesua was not one to give up easily. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and forced a confident smile onto her face. If there was one thing she knew about men, it was that they never truly forgot the woman who once rejected them. She walked up to him, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Kwame," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. He turned slowly, his face unreadable. Up close, he was even more striking than she remembered. The boy she had once known was gone. In his place stood a man who had conquered the world, who had built himself from nothing into a legend. For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe even curiosity. Then, just as quickly, it disappeared. "Yes?" he said, his tone polite but distant. Adesua felt a lump rise in her throat. This was not how it was supposed to go. She smiled, tilting her head slightly. "It's been a long time." Kwame took a sip of his drink, his expression still unreadable. "It has." She waited for him to say more, something, anything, but he didn't. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Adesua swallowed hard, forcing another smile. "You've really done well for yourself," she said, gesturing around the lavish ballroom. "I always knew you had potential." Kwame raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "Did you?" Adesua hesitated. There was something in his voice, something mocking. She knew what he was thinking. Back then, she had not seen his potential. She had only seen his struggle, his empty pockets, his uncertain future. And now she was standing in front of him, hoping he had forgotten. She decided to change her approach. "I was hoping we could catch up," she said, her voice soft. "Maybe over dinner?" For the first time, Kwame looked directly at her, his dark eyes studying her. And then he laughed. It was low, deep, amused. Adesua's face burned. "What's so funny?" Kwame shook his head, still smiling. "Nothing. It's just interesting. You had no time for me when I had nothing, and now you want dinner?" Adesua felt a wave of embarrassment crash over her, but she refused to back down. People change, she said quickly. Situations change. I was young, Kwame. I didn't know any better. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. No, Adesua, you knew exactly what you were doing. You made your choice, and so did I. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the beautiful woman by his side reached for his hand. Baby, everyone is waiting for you, she said, smiling sweetly. Adesua's stomach twisted. Baby? Kwame turned to her with a warm smile, his fingers gently brushing over the woman's hand. I'll be there soon. The woman kissed his cheek before walking away, her gown flowing behind her like a queen. Adesua felt something sharp and painful lodge itself in her chest. You're married? She blurted out before she could stop herself. Kwame's expression didn't change. No, he said simply, not yet. But you're engaged? He took another sip of his drink, his gaze steady. What does it matter to you? Adesua's hands clenched into fists at her sides. This was not how it was supposed to happen. She had come here expecting to rekindle an old spark, to remind him of what they could have been. But instead, she was watching him slip further and further away. This couldn't be the end. She had to do something. For the rest of the night, Adesua watched him from across the room. He was the center of attention, laughing with powerful men, charming beautiful women. It was clear, Kwame Olumide was no longer the man she had rejected. He was untouchable. And yet, she had seen something in his eyes when he looked at her. A flicker of the past. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely over her. And if that was the case, then she still had a chance. She just had to play her cards right. Adesua couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of her encounter with Kwame. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke, calm, confident, untouchable. It infuriated her. How had things changed so much? Once upon a time, he had wanted her. He had looked at her as if she was his entire world. But now he was treating her like a stranger, like she didn't matter. But Adesua refused to accept that. She wasn't just going to walk away. Not when she had finally found the man she had been searching for all her life. She had made a mistake years ago, but mistakes could be corrected, and she was going to fix this. The next morning, she did something she had never done before. She swallowed her pride and asked for help. She called a friend, Chioma, who worked in high society circles. Chioma, I need an invite to Kwame's private event next weekend, she said, skipping the small talk. Chioma was silent for a moment. Then she let out a slow laugh. Adesua, please don't tell me you're chasing him now. You? The same person who called him a broke dreamer years ago? Adesua's jaw tightened. Are you going to help me or not? Chioma sighed. You're lucky I owe you a favor. I'll send the details later. Adesua exhaled, relief washing over her. Now she had one more chance. One last opportunity to remind Kwame of what they could have been. The night that changed everything. A week later, Adesua arrived at the exclusive invite-only party hosted at Kwame's luxury penthouse. The place was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the entire city, expensive chandeliers, and a crowd filled with the country's most powerful people. But she wasn't here for them. She was here for him. She spotted him immediately. He stood at the bar, dressed in a sharp black suit, his posture relaxed yet commanding. The woman from the gala, his rumored fiancée, was nowhere to be seen. Adesua's heart pounded. This was her moment. She walked up to him, her confidence hiding the storm inside her. Are you going to ignore me all night? Kwame turned, his face unreadable. For a second, she thought he was going to dismiss her again. But then, to her surprise, he sighed and gestured toward the balcony. Let's talk. Adesua followed him outside, the city lights stretching endlessly below them. The air was thick with tension, the kind that only comes from unresolved emotions. Kwame leaned against the railing, his gaze distant. Why are you here, Adesua? She stepped closer, her voice softer now. Because I regret how things ended between us. He let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. There was no us, remember? You made that very clear. And her chest tightened. Kwame, I was young. I didn't know any better. But I see things differently now. He finally looked at her, his dark eyes piercing into hers. And what exactly do you see? Adesua swallowed. I see that I let go of a good man. A man with dreams, ambition, and the kind of love I should have valued. And now I want to fix my mistake. Silence. Then Kwame exhaled and shook his head. Adesua, do you know what it took for me to become who I am today? She stayed silent, waiting. It took rejection, he continued. It took humiliation, failure, sleepless nights, and heartbreak. And through all of that, I built myself up. I became the man you see today. And do you know the funny part? She shook her head slowly. Kwame's voice hardened. I never needed to change. I was always this man. The only difference is now people like you finally see my worth. Adesua's heart sank. Kwame, you only want me now because I have money, because I'm powerful. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. But where were you when I had nothing? Tears burned at the back of her eyes. I was stupid, she admitted. I was blind. But I see you now. Kwame studied her for a long time. Then slowly he smiled. A painful, knowing smile. You're right, he said. You do see me now. But I don't see you the same way anymore. Adesua's breath caught in her throat. I spent years thinking about you, he continued. Wondering what I did wrong, why I wasn't good enough. But I've moved on. I've healed. She reached for his hand, but he gently pulled away. Adesua, I don't hate you, he said softly. I just don't want you anymore. And just like that, the final thread holding her hope together snapped. For the first time in her life, Adesua understood what true loss felt like. It wasn't losing a man to another woman. It wasn't watching someone become rich while she stayed the same. It was knowing, truly knowing, that she had let go of something irreplaceable, and there was nothing she could do to bring it back. Kwame gave her one last look before walking back inside, leaving her alone on the balcony. Alone with her regrets. As she stood there, the truth sank deep into her bones. She had turned him down, and now he was the billionaire she could never have.